Welcome to Slumber Darkly, where we send you to sleep with chills. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, a name that strikes fear and revulsion into the hearts of those who know his story. Born on November 1st, 1962, in Miami, Florida, Constanzo would grow up to become one of the most notorious serial killers in history. As the leader of a cult that practiced black magic and human sacrifice, he masterminded the torture and murder of at least 20 people in the late 1980s. But what drove this man to such depths of depravity? How did he lure others into his web of darkness? And what was the terrible toll of his crimes? In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the life and crimes of Adolfo Constanzo, the so-called Godfather of Matamoros. We'll explore his troubled childhood, his rise to power in the Mexican underworld, and the shocking murders that finally brought him down. Be warned, this is not a story for the faint of heart, but it's one that must be told in memory of the innocent lives lost, and as a warning of the evil that men can do. Adolfo Constanzo's dark journey began in Miami, Florida, on November 1st, 1962. His mother, Delia Aurora Gonzalez, was just 15 years old when she gave birth to him, the first of her 3 children. Each of Delia's children was fathered by a different man, and Adolfo never knew his biological father, who died when Adolfo was still an infant. Seeking a fresh start, Delia moved with her young family to San Juan, Puerto Rico. There she remarried and had Adolfo baptized in the Catholic faith. For a short time, young Adolfo even served as an altar boy, but this pious facade couldn't hide the darkness already growing within him. You see, Adolfo's mother Delia had a secret fascination with the occult. On trips to Haiti, she exposed her son to the practices of voodoo. These early experiences kindled a deep interest in black magic that would shape the course of Adolfo's life. When Adolfo was 10 years old, his family moved back to Miami, this time settling in the Little Havana neighborhood. It was here that Adolfo's occult education began in earnest. He became an apprentice to a local priest who practiced Palo Mayombe, an Afro-Caribbean religion that involves animal sacrifice. As a teenager, Adolfo lived a double life. By day, he was a student at Citrus Grove Junior High School. But by night, he cruised the gay nightclubs of Miami, engaging in petty crimes and honing his skills as a fortune teller. He dropped out of school after a single semester at Miami-Dade Junior College, devoting himself entirely to the study and practice of the dark arts. According to some accounts, Adolfo even claimed to have predicted the assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan in 1981. Whether or not this is true, it's clear that by his early 20s, Adolfo Constanzo was already convinced of his own supernatural powers. Powers that he would soon use for terrible ends. In 1983, at the age of 21, Adolfo Constanzo made a fateful move to Mexico City. It was here that he began to build the cult that would become his instrument of evil. His first recruits were 2 young men named Martin Quintana and Omar Orea, who became both his servants and his lovers. With these loyal followers at his side, Constanzo set himself up as a brujo, or sorcerer, catering to the superstitions of the Mexican criminal underworld. Constanzo's magic services were highly sought after by drug dealers, corrupt cops, and other powerful figures in Mexico City. He performed elaborate rituals involving animal sacrifice, offering his clients charms and potions that promised protection from the law and success in their illegal ventures. The blood of goats, chickens, and even exotic animals like zebras and lion cubs flowed freely in Constanzo's ceremonies. But Constanzo wasn't content with animal sacrifice alone. By 1985, he had begun to incorporate human remains into his rituals, robbing graves to obtain bones and other grisly ingredients. And he was about to graduate to murder. According to court testimony, Constanzo committed his first known killings in 1987, when he clashed with a rival gang known as the Calzada family. Constanzo had been providing magical service to the Calzadas, but when they refused to grant him a full partnership in their criminal enterprise, he retaliated with brutal violence. On April 30th, 1987, Constanzo sent his followers to abduct 7 members of the Calzada family. The victims were brutally tortured and killed, their bodies mutilated in a manner suggesting ritual sacrifice. When the bodies were found, investigators were shocked to discover that fingers, toes, brains, and even an entire spinal column had been removed. This gruesome massacre was a turning point for Constanzo. With the Calzada family destroyed, he took over their drug trafficking operations and began to expand his cult. One of his most important recruits during this period was Sarah Aldrete, a young college student whom Constanzo dubbed La Madrina, or the Godmother. Aldrete would become Constanzo's top lieutenant and high priestess, presiding over many of the cult's most horrific rituals. By 1988, Constanzo had acquired Rancho Santa Elena, a remote ranch near the US-Mexico border that he used as a base for his drug smuggling and occult activities. It was here that he kept an enormous cauldron, or nganga, filled with human remains and other powerful ingredients. This nganga was the centerpiece of Constanzo's increasingly depraved rituals, which he believed would bring him the ultimate power he craved. Over the next year, the residents of Rancho Santa Elena committed murder after murder in service of Constanzo's dark vision. Many of the victims were drug dealers who had run afoul of Constanzo, but others were chosen at random, abducted off the streets of nearby Matamoros. The cult's methods were brutal and sadistic. Victims were often kept alive for days, subjected to horrific tortures, before finally being killed with machetes or knives. Constanzo took a perverse pleasure in their suffering, urging his followers to make them scream as they died. After death, the victims' bodies were mutilated in ways that Constanzo believed would enhance his supernatural powers. Brains were removed to give him wisdom, hearts to give him strength, genitals and spines to give him sexual potency and protection from his enemies. One of the most notorious murders committed by the cult was that of Mark Kilroy, a 21-year-old pre-med student from Texas who disappeared while on spring break in Matamoros. On the night of March 14, 1989, Kilroy was abducted off the street and taken to Rancho Santa Elena, where he was brutally tortured and killed. According to later testimony from cult members, Constanzo had become convinced that a rival drug gang was planning to move in on his territory. He decided that a human sacrifice was necessary to protect his business, and Kilroy was chosen as the victim. In a gruesome ritual, Kilroy's brain was removed while he was still alive, then boiled in a cauldron on Constanzo's altar. His legs were also chopped off. Constanzo believed that this would render a shipment of marijuana invisible to Border Patrol agents, allowing it to be smuggled into the United States undetected. But Kilroy's disappearance did not go unnoticed. As a young American tourist, his case quickly attracted the attention of the media and U.S. law enforcement. Pressure mounted on Mexican authorities to find him, even as the cult continued its killing spree undeterred. The end finally came on April 1st, 1989, when Mexican police raided Rancho Santa Elena on a tip about drug trafficking. What they found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Buried in shallow graves around the property were the remains of 15 mutilated corpses, including Mark Kilroy. A blood-spattered altar held Constanzo's infamous nganga, still filled with human remains. Authorities quickly moved to round up members of the cult, but Constanzo himself slipped through their grasp. Unwilling to face the consequences of his crimes, he went into hiding with his most loyal followers, leaving the rest to be arrested and face justice alone. As Mexican authorities closed in, Constanzo grew increasingly desperate and paranoid. He moved from safe house to safe house, always one step ahead of the law. But he knew his time was running out. On May 6, 1989, police finally tracked Constanzo to an apartment in Mexico City. Inside were Constanzo, his male lover Martin Quintana, and 3 other cult members, including El Dubi, Constanzo's personal bodyguard and assassin. As the police moved in, Constanzo made a fateful decision. Rather than surrender, he ordered El Dubi to open fire on the officers outside. A ferocious gunfight ensued, lasting over 45 minutes. Miraculously, only one officer was wounded in the exchange of fire. But Constanzo had no intention of being taken alive. With the situation hopeless, he turned to El Dubi with a final command. He ordered his bodyguard to kill him and Quintana, and then take his own life. El Dubi obeyed, shooting Constanzo and Quintana dead before turning the gun on himself. The shot only wounded El Dubi, and he was taken into custody, along with the other surviving cult members. In the aftermath of the raid, the full extent of Constanzo's crimes began to come to light. Mexican and American authorities launched a massive investigation, uncovering evidence of at least 20 murders committed by the cult between 1986 and 1989. 15 members of the cult were ultimately charged with a variety of crimes, including murder, drug trafficking, weapons offenses, and obstruction of justice. Sara Aldrete, La Madrina, was sentenced to 62 years in prison for her role in the killings. Other key figures, like El Dubi and the Hernandez brothers, received sentences ranging from 30 to 67 years. The Constanzo case sent shockwaves through Mexico and beyond. It revealed the deep ties between the drug trade and occult practices in some parts of Latin America, and raised disturbing questions about the corruption and complicity of local authorities who had turned a blind eye to the cult's activities. More than 3 decades after his death, the specter of Adolfo Constanzo still looms large in the annals of true crime. His story is one of the most bizarre and disturbing cases of serial murder in modern history. A tale of unimaginable cruelty and delusional megalomania. At the heart of the case is Constanzo himself, a figure of undeniable charisma and psychological complexity. From his troubled childhood in Miami to his rise as a powerful brujo in Mexico City, Constanzo's life is a study in the darkest potential of human nature. What drove Constanzo to such extremes of violence and depravity? Some have pointed to his early exposure to voodoo and other occult practices, which may have shaped his worldview and fueled his delusions of supernatural power. Others have suggested that Constanzo was a classic psychopath, lacking in empathy and driven by a relentless need for control and domination. Whatever the root causes of his behavior, there is no denying the terrible human cost of Constanzo's crimes. The victims of the narco-Satanist cult, at least 20 confirmed, and likely many more, were subject to unimaginable suffering before their deaths. Many were young people with their whole lives ahead of them, like Mark Kilroy, the American student whose murder brought Constanzo's crimes to international attention. The Kilroy family and the families of all of Constanzo's victims continue to bear the scars of their loss to this day. In interviews, Mark Kilroy's parents have spoken of the enduring pain of losing their son and their determination to keep his memory alive as a reminder of the evil that men like Constanzo are capable of. For the members of the cult who survived Constanzo's downfall, the road to redemption has been long and difficult. Sarah Aldrete, once Constanzo's top lieutenant, has expressed remorse for her actions and has become a model prisoner, earning multiple degrees behind bars. Others, like Serafin Hernandez Garcia, have been less willing to accept responsibility, continuing to profess their innocence despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. As for Constanzo himself, his final acts of violence and cowardice have ensured that he will be remembered as a monster, not a martyr. By choosing to die at the hands of his own follower rather than face justice, Constanzo robbed his victims and their families of the closure that a trial and conviction might have brought. In the end, perhaps the most important lesson to be drawn from the Constanzo case is the danger of allowing superstition and pseudoscience to take the place of reason and morality. Constanzo's crimes were enabled, in part, by a culture that placed undue faith in the power of the occult, and by a criminal underworld that was all too willing to exploit those beliefs for its own ends. As a society, we must remain vigilant against such dark currents of irrationality and violence. We must work to build a world in which the likes of Adolfo Constanzo can never again find purchase. A world in which the innocent are protected and the guilty are brought to justice. Only by confronting the darkness within the human heart can we hope to prevent future atrocities like those committed at Rancho Santa Elena. Only by remembering the victims and honoring their memory can we ensure that their suffering was not in vain. May the souls of Adolfo Constanzo's victims find peace, and may their families find solace in the knowledge that their loved ones will never be forgotten. And may we all strive to build a more just and humane world, one in which the forces of evil are met with the unwavering light of truth and righteousness. Thank you for joining us on this dark journey into the heart of human evil. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, please consider liking and sharing it with others who may find it valuable. And as always, we welcome your comments and reflections on this difficult but important subject. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and never forget the lessons of the past. Together, we can work to build a brighter future for all.